Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Horn Call podcast. My name is James Bolden. I'm the publications editor for the International Horn Society, and your host. This episode is for April 2022, and I hope that all of you out there all over the world are having a great month of April. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, at least where I am down in the southern part of the United States, the weather is starting to warm up. It's still bearable outside, which is pretty nice, and I'm very much looking forward to the upcoming IHS Symposium in August at Texas A&M University, Kingsville. If you heard our previous episode, the one with Jennifer Schultes, our amazing host of IHS 54, you got to hear all about some of the exciting things that are going to happen there. Let's see, other things going on in my professional life at the moment. We are wrapping up the semester here at my university, and for all of my colleagues on that particular semester system, I imagine you're getting close to the end of your semesters as well. In other places around the world, you may be starting your academic year or in the middle of it. Regardless, I hope that things are going well for you. My guest today, Dr. Mike Harcrow, is a professor of music at Messiah University in Pennsylvania, and the editor, newly minted editor of the Horn and More e-newsletter of the IHS. And we spend a good bit of time talking about that today, as well as Mike's various international performing experiences. He performed professionally in Korea for a number of years and has judged some competitions. He's an artist for Kruspe horns, which is something we spend a little bit of time talking about. So there's quite a bit of variety in today's episode. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Mike Harcrow. So you're up there in Mechanicsburg, huh?
Yes, on the west shore of the Susquehanna River from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, our state capital. I say our like it's my home state, but I'm originally from Texas.
Oh my goodness, I bet the winters were a bit of an adjustment.
Oh yeah, I don't mind watching snow. I don't like driving in it, and I like shoveling it even less. So,
yeah.
Fortunately, our driveway is only 15 feet long, so it's not that bad a job.
Well, that's good. That's great. And thanks for being here with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me on the podcast. For those who may not be familiar with who you are and what you've been doing, give us maybe the thumbnail sketch of how you got to where you are, being a professor of music at Messiah College in Pennsylvania in the United States. You've had you continue to have a very distinguished career. You've performed internationally, done a lot of orchestral playing and teaching. So, you talk about as little or as much of that as you like.
Okay. Well, I will. I'll start with just my education and then jump over some years to Korea. I have a Bachelor of Music Education from what was at the time West Texas State University. It's now part of the A&M system, West Texas A&M. And a few years later, I did a master's degree in horn performance at the University of Miami with Bob Elworthy while he was still living. He's a former principal horn of the Minnesota Orchestra. And I had the great fortune to kind of play up and down the coast there when I was in Miami. And then I went to Korea and worked there for 14 years. I originally went as a Christian missionary, but ended up as principal horn in the National Symphony after just fortuitous circumstances and some years. So that's how I finished my career there. And then I came back to the States and did a doctorate at the University of North Texas, which is near my hometown. I grew up in northern Dallas suburbs and graduated high school from Louisville High School, just south of Denton there. So at the end of my coursework, this is a funny story. I went to the Staples, an office supply store, to buy all the nice paper and the blank CDs to send out packets for interviews. And I got home from the store and our home phone was ringing. For people who don't know, home phones actually did exist at that time. It wasn't that long ago, honestly. That was 2003, 2002, 2003. And I picked it up, and it was the chair of the music department here at Messiah University. And he said, "Hey, I got your your name from some professor friends of mine down there, and they think you'd be a great candidate for us. So I flew up, played the audition, took the interview, and that was the only interview I had. I took the job. They offered me the job. I took it, and been here. This is my 16th year, and really enjoy this place and the size of the department and the variety of things that I do. So, looking maybe at eight, maybe 10 more years of teaching here before retirement. We'll see how the finances look for that.
Sure. Yeah. The light at the end of the tunnel. That's amazing. That's fantastic. And, it strikes me that Messiah there's a lot of great brass stuff going on there, period, because I know a few years ago they had national trumpet competition there, right. I believe. And, right. There's lots of other things going on in the brass world kind of centered around that. And that, universities and colleges in general are special places, and it's always cool for each individual campus to have their own kind of unique culture and cool stuff going on. So that's really great.
Yeah. Well, my department chair is William Stoneman, who is he is the competitions director for the National Trumpet Competition. We've actually hosted that twice. He hosted ITG across the river in Harrisburg because our campus is a little small and couldn't quite accommodate all the trumpet players from around the world. But it was just a 10-minute drive over there. So he's done a lot, and I'm super fortunate to have him as a colleague, and we get along great. Now, we're the only full-time brass faculty here. There's actually not a full-time low brass person, but our adjuncts are phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And our little department is flourishing. So it's a great place to be. I like it. And the other things I do besides teaching horn, I'm actually sort of a de facto head of the brass department because he's department chair. So I really take care of communicating and overseeing what all's going on. He and I co-direct the brass choir, and then I coach all of the brass chamber music from our brass quintets to horn choir, and then kind of help out low brass since we have adjuncts teaching those instruments. And I'm also the head of the theory department. And those are all the things I love: horn, mm-hmm. brass, and theory. It's what I really enjoy doing. So
that's awesome.
I have fun at my job. I really do.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I mean, that's in this day and age. I mean, a job that you can be happy with and feel fulfilled, and that you're making mm-hmm. a difference. I mean, it's totally worth its weight in gold. Now, I want to step back just a little bit and talk. So you mentioned you got this playing job in Korea. How did that come to pass, and what was the audition process like for that? Because I think if there are American listeners and they're familiar with the audition system in American orchestras, it goes one way, and then European orchestras are a different way, and different places have their own approach to getting new members into their orchestra.
Well, I had kind of worked myself out of the missionary work. There were Korean leaders that took that over, and it was awesome. That's what I had hoped for. Just through a series of circumstances, ended up finding out that there was an opening for an associate principal job in the National Symphony. It's called the Korean Symphony Orchestra, but it is basically the National Symphony, one of three large orchestras in Seoul, along with the City Symphony, the Seoul Philharmonic, and then the Broadcasting Orchestra, or KBS Orchestra. So I hadn't played a whole lot, but I practiced up an audition, and I knew that the National Symphony played its own concert series, but they also played for the National Chorus and the National Ballet and the National Opera, and that was super appealing to me. And I'd never really played ballet or opera, but I wanted to learn all that stuff. So there was not a specific audition list. So I worked up kind of a mix of things, particularly from the symphonic rep and from opera, and showed up for the audition. I was the only one auditioning, at least that, and I don't know that they had any other auditions. If they did, I was never told. But I went into the rehearsal room and was face to face with the panel, a large panel of about 60, all the principal players and the music director and a few other key people, just all staring me down. So it was like nothing I'd ever done or seen before. And I got through the end of what I had prepared, and they started asking for things.
Okay.
And I didn't have other music there, so I was able to play some of it from memory, which was all right. And then there were some other things I just had to say, I honestly, I don't have that memorized. I'm really sorry. But I'm glad I had the things memorized that I did. And they offered me the position. And I took it, which was great for my wife, who's Korean, and to continue to live there. Um, so I was the associate principal by that appointment, but I ended up playing second horn because that's what the principal player liked. After he kind of heard what was going on in the section, he said, "Hey, play first if I'm not here, but play second the rest of the time." And I was like, "Okay." And he was a Russian man, Alexander Akimov, and I actually had him and his son create an article for Horn and More, our electronic newsletter.
Oh, great.
Alexander, unfortunately, subsequently has passed away, and that saddens me greatly. He was a good friend. We were like the two white guys in this Korean orchestra. So we relied on each other a lot. And his son, Sergei, is there playing in the Seoul Philharmonic and the City Symphony still, and just a fabulous player. And we have some stories there too, but if that doesn't come up, it's all right. So playing between second and first, usually second, he wasn't gone that much because honestly, there wasn't an associate. In that orchestra. We had 4 players, him and myself and 2 Korean men. And it was a good orchestra. I mean, we had a former associate concertmaster from the Philadelphia Orchestra as our concertmaster, a Korean man. And of course, their concertmaster now is Korean. So there's kind of this long relationship, between some of the great violin studios in Korea and some American orchestras, which is cool, and orchestras around the world, frankly.
Right.
So Alexander, the principal horn player, was playing a handmade mouthpiece that he had made for him by his teacher in Russia, and it wasn't plated, and it had never been plated. It was just raw brass, and he played on a Holton horn that had been issued to him by the theater in Minsk, where he was from, in Belarus, and they were letting him borrow it. He eventually did have to return it. Not that it was the best horn in the world anyway, but that's, they were high dollar things then in that part of the world. But what happened with that mouthpiece is that his lips started to, I think, get brass poisoning. The skin would start to slough off. He also had a problem with his teeth. His 2 front teeth were, for lack of a better word, rotten.
Oh my goodness.
So he, over the course of a few years, I guess it was about 3 years, his playing started to decline. And he was, it was the most awful thing I'd ever seen. I was standing with him before a concert, and the personnel manager came to him and said, "Oh, Alexander, tonight's your last concert."
Oh, no.
And that was the first time he'd heard about it. He was fired before a concert and had to play it anyway.
Oh, my goodness.
And to his credit, he did a stellar job. It was probably the best playing he'd done in a few months. Anyway, that's still kind of a hurtful thing and a sore spot with me with that particular man. I mean, most Koreans are just lovely people, but you have a mix like you find in any part of the world.
Sure.
A mix of characters and personalities, and that was just really the wrong approach for that. But Alexander did find some healing. He started playing a plated mouthpiece and got over the brass poisoning. He had tooth implants that a really fine Korean dentist worked with him to help get. And he ended up being the principal horn in the broadcast orchestra in the KBS Symphony after, it was about 3 years, I guess, 3 or 4 years of recovery that he had. But in the meantime, I got bumped up to acting principal, and then eventually I was appointed principal horn in the orchestra without a re-audition. As acting principal, they heard me play enough and learned that they could trust what I was doing.
Yeah.
So they bumped me up. But I, was playing in a section of 4 horns without an associate or any kind of help, really, unless we had a big Mahler or Strauss, some big blow concert coming up. And then I'd have to go in and request, almost maybe beg, for some help for the concert because they didn't. Right. They expected me to take care of it. And some principal horn players can do that, but that wasn't the part I was built to play. My career started as 4th horn, and I love low horn, and I play a lot of 2nd now. But I did have a career there as a 1st horn player. But we did over 200 performances a year.
That's a heavy schedule.
awful. But and it's because we did our own regular concert series and the ballet and the opera and the chorus and all of that. And for the ballet and the chorus, we would do as many as 12 performances at a time.
A run,
And the Nutcracker was probably the hardest because we did 12 days in a row, 2 a day.
Ouch.
So it was grueling, and of course in the pit you're not going to have an extra down there for the ballet. You just you just suck it up and do it. So
and you figure out those places where you can spell just a little bit, or get the
where things are doubled and what's really what you can use as rest. Yeah, absolutely. So you do that, and that's what I did. But I did sustain an injury. About a year before I left Korea to my lower lip, and it's better, but I think it was a tear. I don't know what it was. It was in the middle of a series of Nutcracker performances, and I just had to keep going. Yeah. So I did, and then we really didn't have but about 2 weeks off before the season started up in January again. So, I felt my responsibility, and I just never took care of it, never got help for it. So, but things are pretty good, as far as playing goes, and I have a good amount of playing around here. I'm a member of the Gettysburg Chamber Orchestra, which is chamber orchestra is a misnomer. I mean, we play full romantic symphonies, but just with maybe a smaller string section. And I sub sometimes with Harrisburg and quite a bit with York, which is nearby in southern Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So I have a good amount of playing, and it's enough. It's, I had a full-blown orchestral career. Don't want that anymore. Don't want to play principal anymore. I'm doing the things I like, and it's good.
Right. And you were doing some teaching in Korea, but then you came back to the United States, and then
I actually I started teaching at Mokwon University, which is a smaller university, a Methodist university in Taejon, which is a good-sized city south of Seoul. And then I was appointed a professor, really an adjunct, but at the National Conservatory, the Korean University of Arts. And that school and Seoul National University are the really big music schools. And so it was an honor. I was teaching incredibly talented students. It was a challenge, but it was really fun to do. And I enjoyed that, and that was really my first university teaching was in Korea. So
yeah, and don't they have? There's an international brass competition they have in Jeju or
yes, on Jeju Island. Yeah, that's a semi-tropical island, kind of south of the Korean Peninsula. I was actually there for the very first of the international brass competitions and festivals that they had. Our symphony brass quintet played that first year. And I've actually been an adjudicator 3 times for the festival. Okay. Once while I was living there, and then I've gone back twice since then to be an adjudicator for the horn part of the competition. It's a high dollar prize if you're the best one. And then they used to have a grand prize, and I think they had to do away with that at some point. But you're still earning $7,000 or $8,000 if you win first prize on your instrument.
My goodness, yeah. Now I don't want to go too deep down the equipment rabbit hole, but I know that it's something that folks love to chat about in the horn world. That's one of the things we share with our trumpet colleagues is a little bit of equipment talk. But is there a particular kind of horn or style that is played in Korea in the orchestras? I know, if you say Germany, people say Engelbert Schmidt or Alexander, and then, various places sometimes have those connotations. Is it that way in Korea?
Yeah, absolutely. Most Koreans who study abroad actually study in Germany. Okay. So when you say horns in Korea, I think German horns, because 103 is the horn to play. You'll occasionally see an 1103, or you'll see an Engelbert Schmidt triple, occasionally a Schmidt single. But it's almost exclusively German horns there.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. And so how did you I do a little research for these things, but I try to just kind of let the conversation flow. That's my way of my excuse for not being super prepared. But I did notice in your bio it says you're an artist for Kruspe horns. And how did that relationship come about? And I think people will be interested to know that company's still around. As in the original Kruspe style horns.
And it's owned by a Japanese man who his parents left Japan to Germany, and I don't know if he was born in Germany or if he was a small child when they went, but his name is Katsushi Sakaino. And I went to Austria a few years ago to play with the Classical Music Festival for the first time, and I have been second horn there several years since. And I thought, well, heck, airport, getting through airport, the baggage and the checking and all that stuff. It would be great if I didn't have to carry a horn. So I saw where he was, and his Katsushi, and he had relocated Kruspe to Bavaria from former East Germany, and that was pretty close to Vienna. So I sent him a note saying, "Hey, could you supply horns for the section for this festival?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, actually I could," because he was trying to promote them. So he brought down 4 instruments, and the section played them that summer, with one exception, who just was going to stick with his own horn. And that was fine. But I liked the horn I had, and I had conversations with Mr. Sakaino along the way, and ended up purchasing that horn for kind of a nice artist price. Nice. And I don't actually, that instrument, he's going to hear this for the first time if he listens to this, is out on loan to a young man who doesn't have an instrument, who's a fine player, who needs to be prepared for some auditions. So I've been playing an old 8D, a pre-letter 8D, which I love, and that's if I leave the German horn, I go back to the 8D, and I've had Schmidt horns, and I have a Cornford triple, and I have I'm a gearhead totally.
Okay.
In my life, I've probably owned more than 50 horns. I don't have that many now. I probably have only a dozen now. Only,
yeah.
But of course, you can only play one at a time. And the 8D has just always felt like going home. It's what I had issued to me when I was in high school. And in college, I played an 8D and bought my own 8Ds. In fact, when I went to Korea, I carried an 8D with me. So it's just kind of what I come back to. There's something really lovely about the Kruspe horn, and people complain about their intonation maybe, and some of the newer models are getting better. The one I have is I have to deal with it a little bit as far as intonation goes. And I had heard my professor, when I was an undergraduate at West Texas, he played a Kruspe horn and sounded stunning on it, and but was fighting intonation. And you would watch his hand in the bell, kind of wiggling when, and he knew exactly what to do. And so I have learned what to do on this instrument, and it's a gorgeous sound. It's a beautiful.
Now, are these large bell throat or medium, or?
I'm actually playing a model that does not look like a Con 8D or the old Kruspe wrap. I have one that some people would compare its look to a 103, but it's really a different wrap. It just has that big open territory around the bell throat between the valve pack and the bell throat, or the tail rather. So it's a medium large bell, and it's an all yellow brass horn. Well, I guess the inner slides may be nickel silver. I don't even know. As much of a gearhead as I am, I should know that. But there are nickel silver parts on it. Really pretty sound.
Okay.
Really
and
sweet.
They make a variety of horns. I think that would be something people are interested in. It's not just one model of horn, although that name has kind of become synonymous with an 8D looking horn when they say Kruspe wrap, but that's not necessarily the same as the company that makes all these different kinds of horns. Right.
Well, Mr. Sakaino actually has 2 companies that are both his that work in the same building, Kruspe and Korea. But the Kruspe is the professional level instrument, and they certainly make the old, the original 2 wraps. But the one I have is a Model 23.
Okay.
And it's a sweet sounding horn. It's powerful, but it just sings beautifully. So
well, that's cool. And I'm assuming there's a website if people want to go check out more information about these horns.
Just Google Kruspe, and you'll find him. And his English is fantastic, and he's actually visited Messiah, and I took him up to Penn State. And when Lisa was still teaching, she just retired. If you know Lisa Bontrager, just retired from there mid-year. So,
well, that's cool.
You didn't. Yeah, you hadn't realized that, had you?
No. Well, I knew that. I knew that Penn State had come open, but no, just that he was. coming to the United States, and hopefully, I want to say I've seen a Kruspe booth at an IHS symposium. I can't remember when or where.
You have, yes. He's faithful to go to those conventions and symposiums. He deals, I believe, through Dennis Houghton over in Fort Worth, Texas, and has had representation at TMEA,
okay,
the Texas State Convention, which is massive, maybe even up in the Midwest. So he's trying to promote things here.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, and, speaking about, your international career and, these various connections that you've created over the years, I think now's a good time to kind of turn our attention to the newsletter. And I was extremely pleased with the job that Christina Masha Turner was doing, and then when you decided to come on board and were gracious enough to take over the editorship of that, and you continue to be doing an excellent job. So I hope Christina is proud of you, and I'm sure she is. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with that, first being a contributing editor for it, and then now you've come into the position as editor of the e-newsletter.
Andrew Pelleter is the connection there. He had asked me previously to oversee a regular feature in the Horn Call, which actually Ellie Jenkins is doing now.
Oh, the core values,
the core values. And originally I had a different name. I was like Meet Your Maker or something. Something kind of
I like that. A
little dark sounding, but I refused that one. And then he came back at me a while later and said, "Hey, would you join the editorial staff?" And of course, Christina talked to me first before she approved it as well. And so I think I served on the staff 5 years or more. I came on not right at the beginning. And I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed reaching out to people and soliciting articles and information. And so when she had decided to retire, I don't know if I was her first choice, but she came to me pretty soon in the process and asked if I'd be interested, and I had to take some time to think about it. And she and I talked a couple of times, and I made the decision to do it. And I enjoy this so much. It is incredibly fun. And I really have just been able to keep in mind Jeff Nelson's original values and ideas for it, to have all kinds of horn-related stuff from all kinds of horn-related people from all kinds of places around the planet. Just a little bit more casual and broad-based publication than the Horn Call, and the Horn Call is not a big academic journal, but it is a different level.
And there's a different, theme and a different tone, I think, to the e-newsletter. And I think, they both have their place. And I mean, I think the IHS has always been an international society, but I think more now than perhaps I don't even want to say that. I would just say an ongoing goal is to continue to make the IHS as international as possible. And I think the e-newsletter is just doing a fantastic job doing that. So I'm very appreciative of your work and all of the work of the contributors for that.
Yes. I really do have a lot of, let's say, Facebook friends from around the world, but many that I've met too from different places. Nobuaki Fukukawa, who's on the editorial staff too, he and I adjudicated at the Jeju Festival in 2019. So it was nice to actually meet him in person. That was before I took this on. But knowing who he is and what a kind man he is and what a powerful player he is, it's wonderful. So I enjoy that, having lived overseas, not just in Korea. I lived in Japan for a short time, and I've traveled to 40 some odd countries touring. I love that. And this is kind of a way to vicariously keep doing that, I suppose. In the upcoming February newsletter, for example, I decided to reach out to players I knew from Facebook in places we don't hear about a lot, and that's Cairo, Egypt, and Manila, the capital of the Philippines. So I got contributions from a couple of a guy in each place, and it's interesting to hear, what's going on or what's not going on, and what the cultural impacts are that prevent it or that elevate it. So.
Yeah, and I think it's inspiring to see that, no matter where we are in the world, no matter what necessarily the political or economic situation is, people find a way to make music. And, maybe it's not with the best instrument that could possibly be in their hands, but they find a way. There are orchestras in the places where you would think, my goodness, how do they even have an orchestra there? But they do, and they have horn players, and they're passionate, and they're excited about sharing what they do with the world. So I think you're absolutely doing the right thing.
Yeah. Well, the contributor for the Cairo presentation, Dr. Abunaga, had studied in the States, and he is originally Egyptian, but he spent some years in the States, actually in the Deep South, and he addresses these things, very frankly, very matter of factly in what he writes. It's like, look, yeah, this is not everybody's cup of tea in Egypt, and these are the things that hinder us, and he's really open about that. But the fact that he's able to flourish there and be a teacher at their conservatory, their one conservatory in the country, he's retired from the symphony in Cairo, but he is a soloist and has a really cool chamber music group that he's put together that I'll let the listener read about when the issue comes out, because it's really fascinating.
That's excellent. And one of the things that continues to develop in the e-newsletter, and you can probably speak to this more since you're more involved with it, but I love seeing, the interactive content, the embedded videos, and the bells and whistles that you just can't do them in a print journal, and it's interesting to see that people really like having a printed horn call. But I think the e-newsletter is such a special thing as well, because of the content that you can put in there. You don't have to go, look it up somewhere. You click on it and it's there, and it's at your fingertips. So
yeah, so to have downloads and to have videos and audio clips, I love that. And as the interwebs become even more interactive, I hope we'll include every kind of technology as it comes along. And I am no technophile by any means, but I want to learn it. I want to have more interaction. And the other thing that we do is we, for the most part, issue monthly. And the horn call is 3 times a year, maybe 4.
3, yeah. 3, yeah.
3. And we might miss a month, after, I wasn't really intending to have a January issue, but all this content came up.
Right.
And we had 2 issues in December because we had all this Christmas stuff to include. And I loved doing all of it. It was fun to do. And it does involve time to solicit content and to edit. And, the editorial staff are great, in helping out. Especially, and I really have to thank Dan Phillips publicly, because he is a phenomenal technical editor on all fronts for the International Horn Society. Yes. So Dan, thank you.
Big shout out. Yeah. Shout out to Dan Phillips. Yeah. And I think, there are multiple social media platforms with thousands and thousands of members, and that, it is a hive mind, but I think part of the special nature of the IHS is that this content is curated. It not just anyone is just kind of, saying whatever they think. It may be great advice, it may not be. And I think that's part and parcel of the whole social media equation. But I think the newsletter is, that this content has been curated, it's been edited, it's good stuff. And I appreciate that a lot. And I think, nowadays, there's a lot of information out there, but not all of it is created equal. So I think I think that's a huge responsibility of the IHS, is to make sure that we get the best information we can, and that it's current and it's relevant, and so and not to down social media. There's nothing wrong with it, but I think our space is slightly different than that.
Right. Well, and the place it really kind of hits home for me in Horn and More is with our pedagogy column, because we're using those to offer advice, not medical advice necessarily, but playing help. Patrick Hughes, the professor over at the University of Texas, I studied with him briefly when I was back in Texas, a few months, and he helped me so much with one concept. And I asked him, I said, would you let us publish that? And he was gracious and said, yes. And it's in the February issue. So look for that. It's really
I can't wait to see that. Yeah.
Great information on, just immediate fast air and how that can help you in the upper range, but actually anywhere on the instrument. Really practical, easy advice to put into practice.
Yeah, Pat's a lovely guy and a fantastic teacher, and just, man, what a monster player. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
But well, that's great. And what I always like to do at some point in these talks is talk a little bit about your personal relationship with the IHS, how you got involved with it, and maybe, words of encouragement, or, if you were to talk to somebody who's a horn player and they're maybe not a member of the IHS, what would be some things that you would say to them to encourage them to become a member and to support their society?
Well, first of all, just the resources. Yeah, there are discounts to the symposia and maybe from some vendors and stuff like that. Oh, I'm a member of the IHS, or hit the little IHS button to get a discount on your purchase or whatever. But the resources are awesome. And this is from the IHS is what exposed me to different schools of playing. Like, without the IHS, I probably wouldn't have known for years about Herman Baumann or the players from France or Russia and players around the world. And then to actually have lived in Asia and to hear these incredible players, some of my Korean former students, have great jobs in Europe now. And I have former students playing all over Korea, and it's humbling. And but it was the IHS, and it was my professor at West Texas, Ron Lemon, who introduced his studios each year to the IHS and said, yeah, you should really join. They've got student discount rates. And somewhere early on, I sort of had become so enamored with it that I got a life membership when those first came out. I had scraped together the $500 that it cost way back then, and have sort of been camping out with that all these years. So it's nice to be able to contribute now as the editor for Horn and More, to just offer something back, for everything I've gotten. So I encourage my students to join, and my colleagues, I ask, have you seen the latest Horn and More? Did you get the horn call? I ask the question. I do. I ask them, and say, hey, look, there's really good stuff here. And it's for a while the IHS had an academic journal, a refereed
the Horn Call Annual,
which I honestly wish that would come back. I think that's a really
you're not the first person to say that. You're not the first person to say that. So it is on our radar. So
at least we have the library, we have the storehouse for academic documents and reportings and things like that. Yeah. So, but I like, if anybody who's listening has seen my Facebook page, I am like Dad Joke Central. I'm just goofy, and I like humor. And so to include a bit of that in Horn and More, I can get away with that, Like when I wrote the greeting for the early December issue, I had this goofy picture of me with stopping mutes that looked like they were from Whoville. So I thought, oh, that's cute, that's funny, that's appropriate for Christmas, for those who know the references. But we can take ourselves too seriously. And it's nice to step back and just enjoy each other's company and not be so serious about it all the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And in the tribute to Dale Clevenger, who passed away these few weeks ago, David Griffin from the Chicago Symphony wrote this tribute, and he talks about Dale's sense of humor and how kind and generous he was. And certainly we... if you know Lowell Greer or know of him, that he was that kind of man as well. Yes. So I love the two memorial tributes that are coming out in this issue for these legends and masters who've left us. Yeah. Because we see their humanity, and for Lowell, it's a great deal of humor, and for Dale, it's a great deal of kindness and generosity and encouragement.
Yeah, Lowell was such a good storyteller. I got to work with him briefly at the Kendall Betts Horn Camp many years ago, and just I remember those lessons and coachings very fondly with Lowell Greer. So,
well, a huge regret is that I never met either of these two men, and I lived in Chicago for about a year and a half. Well, I played in the Grant Park Symphony and never met Dale Clevenger while I was there. I'm kicking myself. waited too long.
It's impossible to do everything, and
Right.
you just, at the end of the day, you kind of have to, the opportunities that you have are the ones that you have. So.
Right. And I've had great opportunities, but those men have impacted me. They are like top of the list musical heroes to me for very different reasons. I mean, one of my favorite albums, and I probably have 40 some odd Mozart CDs, complete recordings of Mozart concertos from players around the world and from different eras. But my very favorite one is Lowell Greer's with the Philharmonia. It's on natural horn, but he gets the humor of these pieces, and you hear it. You hear his personality, you hear his understanding of the naughty things that Mozart wrote in the margins, and the kind of the brevity and fun and lightheartedness of these concertos compared to Mozart's other concertos.
And the sensitivity of Lowell's playing always struck me as just that's just really beautiful music making, period. It doesn't matter what, it could have been a trash can or a hose or something, but it's I agree completely. Yeah. So
well, it's we've lost two giants, but their legacy will endure through their students who are now teaching, and that will be passed on through the recordings. Thank goodness we have this great repository of recordings from them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Mike, it's been a pleasure today, and thank you so much for speaking with me.
Absolutely. A genuine pleasure. Yeah. Let's do it again in a couple of years.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll have new things to catch up on. or mayonnaise, if you want the dad joke.
Right.
Oh, sorry.